And we are officially live. Another episode of Shut Up and Invest. Thank you guys for joining us. We are talking about a hot topic today. We got a ton of questions. There's a lot of confusion on how to determine the value of a deal, how to comp properties, make sure the value's there, how to price out, how do we know what to put. So we're going to be talking numbers. We're going to be talking value. We're going to be talking the profit margins based off what the values are and kind of determining, formulas and little shortcuts. And my man Jay Money, who is big on analyzing, especially a lot of the joint venture deals you guys send us. We notice that there's a lot of what's the best way to call it, Jory? Optimism and value.
A lot of optimism in the ARVs, the after repair values. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
So, we understand and listen, Jory, I don't know if you would agree. I've been wrong before. I've said there's no way this property is going to sell for $350,000. And lo and behold, someone comes around and spends it. So, but those are the few and far betweens. And I think sometimes whenever you find those outliers where you find that international buyer that comes and spends the money on it, or some type of special situation that buys a property that's not typically the average price point, I think then everybody starts to kind of like, oh well, this, I could sell it for every deal we can push. They kind of use that as the rule of thumb, and I get it. Hey, listen, I played that game myself.
No, I think that's what's so cool is what you said. Those are outliers, right? We don't want to comp off the outliers. We want to comp off of the majority of comps, And a lot of properties in like cash flow markets in the city, right, with tenants in place. I see a lot of questions. People say, "Hey, how do I comp? How do I find values in these properties?" So, I want to take the time today to kind of go over that, how we comp them, how we find, how we comp and price our properties that we sell instead of financing. Just kind of give some tidbits because I'm getting a lot of ARVs where when I go comp them myself, I'm like, there's no, and I see there's the one right there, but there's no way that we're gonna, buy this deal based off of that one comp.
Agreed. So let's kind of break down, and I'm actually gonna go look for. I think our friends over at Keegley. I don't know if you noticed, they did a social media post with a little bit of a breakdown. I think I'm gonna bring it up because it was actually really good. But why don't you kind of start breaking down the process of analyzing a comparable and what are some of the things you're looking for, and kind of like just the 101 when we're looking at values of properties?
Definitely. Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors that come into play, right? First of all, if you just want to get a basic general outline of what their property's worth, right? You want to go pull comps in that area. And I always tell people a good thing right now is that you can use a tool where you can actually draw out a boundary, right? So this is from when I was a realtor. I never pull comps based off of a radius search. A radius search means, hey, everything within 1.5 miles, right? That's 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. Pull me those comps, right? I never pull comps off of that, right? Zillow does that. Zillow does a mile radius, and they'll pull everything in there and say, this is our estimate. You have to understand, though, especially in most cities, every street is different, right? Like you can be in Miami on one street, Kev, you go down another street, you're a whole different neighborhood, right? So you want to make sure that, when you're comping, the first thing you want to do is you want to actually draw a boundary, right? So let's say, you know the area very well, and okay, if I cross 3rd Street, the values drop by half, right? You don't want to include anything past that side of that street in your comps, okay? Let's say you're virtual, because I'm virtual. So a lot of markets that we're comping, right, me and Kevin, we're not there, right? So, okay, I don't know where those landmarks are, but I do know how to find the major streets, right? So I'll go on Zillow, and I'll find the major North Street, the major South Street, the major street to the east, and the major street to the west. And I'll draw a square around that area, and then I'll pull comps in that square. So I think that's the main thing is like determining your area, right? If it's in a city, you want to determine your area. If it's a condo, let's say it's a condo. Condos are pretty easy, right? Condos are in a development. They're in a condo. You find all like condos. If it's in like a housing community, right, like a gated community, Those are easy. It's when you get these older homes in cities or rural areas, you got to be very, very specific on how you're pulling comps. And I would always say use a boundary. Use a boundary tool. Don't just pull off a radius.
Yeah, that is exactly, I think, the biggest thing, the takeaway from everything you just said. Like, it's, if you're in areas and you're doing virtual real estate investing, which is definitely profitable to be able to do, but it scares most people because, hey, how do I know? How do I really know? How can I really tell? And this breakdown that you just gave is the answer to all that. You can pretty much invest as long as you stay within the neighborhood when you're running comparables. The tricky part becomes, okay, let's say I'm sticking in this box. I'm not crossing over to the main roads that we can tell in the grid of the map when I'm looking at my comparables, which you can do this on Google Images. You could do this on Zillow. Zillow always has a map whenever you're looking at the property because you don't want to go off the Zestimate that Zillow says, because their algorithm, they're crossing the streets and they're basically doing what we're telling you not to do. So that is not an accurate number. So if you're staying within the grid, if you're staying within the square, what happens when there is no comparables within this neighborhood? What happens when I'm not trying to cross the street, but I can't find anything that's recently sold that matches the type of property we have? Or, like you said, condos are easy until there is no sales in that community, in that condo. And that becomes challenging. And you know, with a little bit of doing it a couple times and having those scenarios, you start to get the hang of it. But in your case, Jay, when you see basically that there's no comparables within that little grid area, within that square, that neighborhood, what do you do at that point?
Got it. So first of all, usually if you get one of those situations, it's for two things, right? You're either in a rural area where there's not a lot of houses kind of clumped together. You have to reach out farther. Or if you get an area where you can't find any recent sales, that could mean it's either a hot area because no one's selling their house, right? It's just they're all happy with it. Or it could be one of those rough areas where, hey, nothing's selling, right? So if that happens, what I usually do first is I say, okay, what is for sale right now? Not what's sold, what's for sale right now, right? So if I go to an area where I can't find any comps, what's for sale? I'll look and see what's for sale, see what those prices are, see how long they've been on the market, and I'll say, okay, I definitely need to be underneath this price point to be able to sell this house, right? That's what I'll do, number one. Number two, I'll expand the time frame of my search, right? So we always go back 6 months. 6 months is pretty much the basis, the minimum of which you want to go back. There's nothing there in 6 months, right? You might have to go out 9 months to a year, right? So I'll do that first. Before I go outside that area, I'll go back as far as more time period first and see if there's more comps. Then if there's not, you just have to just expand that box. But make sure when you expand that box, you're looking for light properties, right? So same bedrooms, right? If you got a 2-bedroom house, do not pull 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom comps, right? Because a 2 to 3 bedroom is one of the biggest jumps in price points you'll see in the real estate market, right? So don't pull that. You got to find, and that's another point right there. 2 bedrooms are hard to comp, right? They're like, especially in certain cities where 3 or 4 bedrooms is the norm, it's hard to find a 2-bedroom comp. So you might have to go outside that area. So, I look at time sold first, right? Expand that number out. Secondly, I'll look at, open up my box a little bit. But again, make sure you know the area. If that next street over is a high-end neighborhood and you're in a C-class neighborhood, right? Go find another comparable C-class neighborhood and get comps from there. Don't just go to the next street over.
Yeah. Go opening up the mile radius, opening up the time frame. I really love the little tip that you gave of seeing what's being sold right there. You might have 2 or 3 or 4 listings. They might not have sold yet. I take a look at how long they've been on the market for sale, because you might find somebody trying to sell a property right next to yours and they're asking 350,000, but it's been sitting for almost a year and nobody's bought it. So right there, if you can't find any comparables, if you're going outside the mile radius, if you're going outside of 6 months and now you're looking at 9 months or 12 months, and you're in this rural area, there's still not a lot of sales, but you see a property that's trying to sell for 350, but it's been sitting for a year, I'm not really thinking that I could sell it for 350. That's not a number that I'm using, because if it could, I'm obviously looking at the pictures and seeing what the quality looks like. But if it was worth 350 and I can sell mine and it's comparable, then why isn't it selling? And that's kind of the Inspector Gadget detective hat that you got to put on when you're looking at comparables. What's being sold and what has closed. Look at the pictures. Look at the square footage. Like what you said, comparing the same neighborhoods is going to be huge. Tough when you're not in that neighborhood and in the virtual. But again, if you're going to cross the main road, give a call to a realtor, a local realtor in the area. Hey, I'm looking at a property in such and such place. Do you have any other properties for sale in this area? What do you think it's worth? I'm seeing if you cross over such and such street, there's other properties worth this much. What do you think about that neighborhood? And a realtor is going to give you the consultation of the area and why it makes sense or why it doesn't make sense and how much do they think it's worth. So that is another hack that you can use at all times if you're confused because you're in a difficult, area to comp a property.
Yeah. Another key point too is like you don't see this as much in the South, but up north and Midwest, like things like basements, right? My house has a basement. Kevin's house doesn't have a basement. Do not compare a house without a basement to a house with a basement, because basements, especially if that basement can be used as living space or any kind of space, that adds value to a house. So I see people say, hey, this house is a 2-bedroom with no basement, and they'll send me a comp of a 3-bedroom, with a basement. And there's no way you ever want to compare those two, Garages. If I have a garage, that's going to add value to if I don't have a garage, So pools, right? Stuff like that. You got to make sure that when you're comping it, like those things add value to a property. So don't try to throw in a comp that has a 2-stall garage and you have a 1-stall garage, right? They don't compare.
Yeah. Here's the post that I was telling you that our guys over at Keegley posted the other day. And it's kind of like a little cheat sheet. I really liked it because I figured we would use it and break it down on the show. Here it says, same subdivision, exactly what we were talking about. The grid, the neighborhood, stick to the area, don't cross major streets. And you're looking for plus or minus 200 square feet. Now, that's the variance. So if the property you're looking at is around 1,500 square feet, you're looking at properties that are between 1,300 and 1,700 square feet. That's what that means right there.
Yep.
Same property type. That's exactly what you were saying, Jay. You're not comparing a ranch to a historical area or a 2-story new construction to,
40. Another one on that too is like the exterior material, right? A brick houses sell for a lot more than just a vinyl side of the house, right? So don't send me a brick ranch and compare that to your 2-story aluminum siding house. They don't compare.
Right. Don't cross any major roads. Exactly what we were talking about. This is a good one. Within 5 years of construction.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not going to compare a 1956 house to one that was built in 2008. It's just a completely different world.
Yep. You can't do that.
But we have people trying to do it to justify their price point that they want to be able to do it. And why is this so important? Because I've seen people buy these properties, invest money, and are using the wrong comparable to try to make this deal work, and then they're stuck.
Yeah, then you get a bad reputation, right? Your name is bad in the street. You're sending deals. Remember, this is coming from a realtor standpoint, I've always been very conservative on ARVs, right? Because if I tell you 250 and it's worth 200 grand, you're going to come back to me and say, hey, I use your CMA, your ARV. This is what happened. I always go underneath, so promise less and deliver more if you can, so always be more conservative. I always look in the neighborhood and say, okay, show me. If you see a bunch of clustered prices, right, I'm going to go to that medium cluster, not the 2 or 3, 150 when the majority are 120. You know, don't try to stretch to make an ARV work.
Right. Now we got Ken asking or just saying that running comps by far is the toughest thing for him, especially in a small market that he's in. And he's saying that his mentor told him he does plus or minus 10%. He said it's a big difference, plus or minus 200 square feet in a 1500 and in a 3500 square feet house. So if you did 10% in a 3500, you're looking at 350 square feet. If you did 10% in a 1500 house, you're looking at 150 square feet difference. It's still within the range. I'm not, obviously the bigger the house, you can stretch it a little. That's not a bad rule of thumb as well. Here it says better to time travel than leave the subdivision. Okay, so that's a good point. What they're saying here is before you cross the street, exactly, go back further.
Yeah, I agree with that big time. You know, because I mean, let's be honest, like the price is going to differ. If you look right now, you say, hey, I'm going to look a year back, right? So February 2020, you might see a huge difference in price between February 2020 and today in an area with a lot of sales. But if it's an area with very few sales, there's probably not that much of a difference in price from then to now, you know?
Right. Now, Jay, would you say every 3 months when you start going back in time, or are you doing every 6 months?
I do 6 months. No, I do 6 months, right? So like I'm always going at 6 months, you know. Let's say multi-units, for example, right? Multi-units are kind of hard to comp in a lot of places. So I always start at like a year of multi-units just because, you know, usually, unless it's a neighborhood that has a lot of multi-units there, it's tough to find multi-unit comps. So I always start at a year there, but I usually go 6 months or a year, you know.
And then I agree with that. I agree that multifamily is tough. And when you don't find it, you go back to 12 months after the 6 month search, or you go back 9 months. How do you play it?
I would go 9 first, then I would go to 12. Yeah, I would add 3 months first. Yep.
Okay. Adjustments. So only compare homes within 2,500 square feet of lot size. So now they're talking about the lot size. Why don't you break down the difference between living area and lot size?
Got it. So living area is the structure in the house that you can actually live in, right? So again, we said the basement. So let's say you have a base. So in Michigan, for example, we have what's called Michigan basements. A Michigan basement is like a dungeon. You know, spider webs. This might be wet down there. We don't consider that living space, right? A full basement is like, okay, I can finish it if I want to, or it already is finished with drywall, carpet. I can live there. I can have an entertainment room, another bedroom, maybe a bar over here, right? That full basement is living space. Maybe it adds 800 square feet, right? That Michigan basement could be the same size, but I can't live down there. We're not adding that as like living space, right? So that's living space. A lot size is the property, right? So the house is on a lot, the whole size of the lot. So your yard from the street to wherever it ends, that's your lot size.
Right. And when comparing lot sizes, you might have a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house that's 1,500 square feet that sits on a $6,000 square foot lot size. Then you might have another 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house that sits on a 10,000 square foot lot size. Yeah. That does make a difference when you're talking about 4,000 square feet. So that's what it's telling you here. Like, try to stay within that 2,500 range, simply because if you got a huge yard, that makes a little bit of a difference.
It does. You got to remember, what are people looking for, right? If you got a family, right? If you're me and my wife with, 5 kids and a dog, I want a yard, right? If you're Kevin, who's single with a newborn, he doesn't need a yard as much yet, right? He might be thinking about a yard in a few years, but right now he doesn't need a yard as much, right? So you got to think about that, and that does affect the price.
Yeah. So here is the biggest questions that I get when we're comping properties. It's, well, how much do I add for an extra bedroom? And how much do I add for an extra bathroom? And how about a pool? And how about a garage? And how about a carport? So here you see the breakdown for a bedroom, depending on the size and depending on what property types we're looking at. It's anywhere between $10,000 to $25,000 plus or minus.
Mm-hmm.
A garage, about 10,000. If it's not a garage, instead it's a carport. That's not the same, so that's a little less. That's a $5,000. Let me move the mouse. A pool, depending on your area, I've seen it between 10 and 15,000. So a
Yeah.
pool, I would say 10,000 in your smaller markets, 15,000 in your bigger markets. If it's a huge luxury pool and you're comping in the luxury space, these numbers are a little different. Um, Here it says traffic and commercial. So we got under 350,000 and over 500,000. And you'll see here, if it's over 500,000, they default to percentages. So siding, backing, and fronting goes up 10, 15, 20%. And under 350, they go between 10K and 20K.
So is that talking about, because we didn't talk about this shit, is that talking about like a house that's on a busy street when they say traffic? Is that what they're talking about?
Correct. Or if it's got some commercial.
Yeah. No, that's one thing too, that a busy street is going to bring the value down, right? So just think about that. If it's a residential house, a busy street usually will knock some off the value, right? Like let's say you're in a neighborhood where the average price is 150, but you have the house on that busy street that starts the neighborhood. I'm going to take off about 10K for that, And I've actually bought and sold houses on busy streets, even if you're selling them or you're renting them out, you're going to take off a little bit for that.
Yeah, we got Daryl asking, what about tear down properties? That's a good question. It depends what you're going to build back up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Depending on what you're going to build back up, you got to comp it. I've seen too many people make mistakes where they build this amazing new construction over the top with a pool and a jacuzzi waterfall, and in a neighborhood that there is absolutely no other properties like that. And then they want 650,000 in a neighborhood that the highest sales are 400,000. That becomes a very tough property to basically sell if you're going to have buyers that are going to try to finance it.
That is, I have a real life example about that, right? So when we bought my last house in Michigan, right, we actually went in and did a rehab and interior. The house was normal to the most of the neighborhood, but the interior rehab, I say, was more modern than most houses in that neighborhood. I've been coming down to South Beach every year getting ideas from there. We went to sell that house. We sold the house 6 years later. We were still getting comments like, "Oh, the house is just so modern. It's just so like it wasn't normal to the area," right? So even your interior designs or what you're doing outside, you can do everything you want to. The neighborhood is only going to get honor what the neighborhood can give, unless you have, like Kevin said, that one-off unicorn buyer who's going to willing to pay more, right? So when you're doing any kind of rehab, make sure you're doing it to the customer of the area, right? The South has different things than the Midwest, the West or the East, right? Like try to stay close to the customer of the area so that you don't price yourself out of that neighborhood.
Yeah, 100%. And then finally here they get into what you've been talking about, the basement and a guest house. So what they're saying is once you determine how much it's a price per square foot value, take 50% of it and assign that to the basement square footage or the guest house, assuming it's living area.
Yeah.
Not a bad cheat sheet. I would say this is pretty accurate, give or take, a couple 5,000 plus or minus here and there, depending on the market you're in. But this is a good rule of thumb right here. I like this.
That is. Shout out to Jamil and Keegley. They do a lot of stuff on the buyer side, so they're comping properties all day. So that's definitely a good cheat sheet.
Yeah, we got another question. Do you have a good method for comping buy and hold deals in the Baltimore market? All right, so this is what we were talking about. As far as your cash flow markets, if you're looking at cash flow properties, are we comping them the same exact way?
So first thing with this, and we get this question more than any question, right? People have a hard time comping properties that have tenants in place right now, right? And honestly, it's actually might be the easiest kind of property to comp, to tell you the truth, right? First of all, you got to know your areas. I don't want to just say cap rate, right? Because people say cap rate. What's your area's cap rate? That is a good number to use as your cap rate, but also there's an easier number to find out, right? Like what do your investors want to get as far as their rental income to their price, right? So, for example, you hear the 1% rule a lot, right? If you're in Miami, can you even get 1% rule in Miami right now, Kevin, where you buy the house and the rent equals 1% of the price?
Some places, yeah.
Right. So if you're in Miami, you're very happy if you got the 1% rule. If you're buying in the Midwest where I buy at, I'm not looking at nothing that's only gonna give me 1%, right? I'm looking at 2 to 3%, right? So that's the first thing is realize what are people.
Explain for the people that don't know what the 1% rule or 2% rule is.
Got it. Let's say my market gives the 1% rule. Okay. If I'm gonna buy a house that the rental income is $1,000 a month. That's just gross rent, right? I'm going to be happy paying $100,000 for that house. That 1,000 is 1% of that $100,000 purchase price, right? That's the 1% rule, right? So some markets are 1% rule. If a market has appreciation, they usually are happy with 1%. If it's a cash flow market, you're looking at 2 to 3%, right? So if I'm buying that same house in the cash flow market, right, I want to get the 2% rule, or 1.5% rule. Just depends on where you're at. So that's what that rule is. You take the rental income per month and you get 1, 2, 3% of what your purchase price is, right? So
if you're buying a property at $50,000, you're not just trying to get $500 rent at 1%.
Now where I'm at, now where we're buying at. Now again, it depends on your market. Some markets only give you 1%, right? If I'm buying 50 grand, I'm probably trying to get $750, $800 a month because I'm getting 1.5%, right? And of course, those numbers change. Like right now, the market's hot, so it's a lot harder to find a 2% rule. You can still find them, I can find 2.5 some places, but you usually get higher percentage rules of rent towards price and less appreciating markets. That's kind of the rule, So you have to know your market first, right? So like if I'm in Baltimore, I got to know. What are people renting these houses for? How do I find it out? I talk to property managers, right? I talk to realtors. I go on Zillow and check out these estimates. There's also like Rental Meter. There's all kinds of sites online where you can look at rents, right? I talk to other investors. I talk to investors at local meetups, REI clubs. I just say, hey, what are you getting for rent in these areas and what are you paying for it? And I find the norm in my area. That's the main. If you don't know what your market gives for rents and prices, you'll have no shot trying to comp out that property.
Yeah, 100%. And at the end of the day, that's also no different than when you were selling. You want to do also the same analysis we just broke down, because if the day of tomorrow you need to turn around and sell it, you still want to check within your neighborhood, within your same side division, what a property like that is selling for. So you still run comps very similar to what we explained in the beginning. And now you're just adding the extra steps of looking at what the rents go for to justify the price you're paying or not, based off of everything that Jay just explained.
Exactly. If you have a duplex, right, in a certain neighborhood in Baltimore, right, run that same comp values. Draw that boundary on those streets that make up that neighborhood. Look for duplexes in that neighborhood, right? See what they're selling for. Now, with investment, with buy and hold, is two things. Are you selling this buy and hold turnkey, complete? If it's complete, find comps that are complete turnkey properties, right? If you're selling it as is, look for other duplexes that you're selling as is, right? So it's still find that number what it is, right? But then if there's a tenant in place already, then you go to the next step and say, okay, this house is getting $1,000 a month for rent. What's my next question, Kevin? Can I get $1,250? Because that $1,000 might be low, right? So if I can get $1,250, I'm going to market that house and price it with the $1,250 rent, because you're going to say, hey, when you buy this house, you can raise the rents. So those are a few of the things you do when you're looking for buy and hold properties.
Yeah. Eddie's asking where he can get the cheat sheet. We're going to post it in the Facebook group. So if you guys go on Facebook, we have a free group that you definitely need to be a part of, that they're in there constantly talking about deals and questions. And that's how we get a lot of questions for the show every week. So go to the Facebook, search for Shut Up and Invest, and I'll go ahead and post this after we wrap up here today.
Let's go to Daryl's question because he had a follow-up question to that teardown. So ask him.
If I'm wholesaling it, how do you comp a teardown to the end buyer because I have no plans to build?
That kind of goes back to what we had that live a few weeks ago about land, right? If you're going to completely tear the house down, right, find out how much do lots in that area go for, okay? Now, remember, if a lot goes for 10 grand and there's a house still there, you got to find out how much it's going to cost to tear the house down. So you just can't say, hey, I'm going to get this and sell it for 10 grand because whoever buys that has to pay for the tear down too. So you got to do a little bit more work and say, okay, what are vacant lots going for? What does it cost to tear this house down? And then find your number from there. And then, like Kevin said, is that lot right in the area where it's now been zoned commercial or residential and commercial? Because you got to figure out what can you build in that lot. But you got to figure out what lots go for and find out the price of tearing down that house, and then come up with your price.
Yeah. Another way too is sell the dream. If you are in a neighborhood and you got to tear down and building it back up to the nicer properties that are within that neighborhood, if you have a developer, you show them the comparable, like, hey, listen, you can easily sell a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in this neighborhood for $450,000. A tear down is probably going to cost you X. And if you can build it back up at X per square foot, you have easily a profit margin of 150 grand or whatever the numbers come out to be. So just comping the neighborhood, seeing what the nicest options are that is realistic, right? You're not going to, again, this goes back to lot size. You're not going to take the nicest house in the neighborhood. Let's say it's 450,000 on a 12,000 square foot lot, and you have a 5,300 square foot lot, and you're trying to convince somebody to build that $450,000 house on that lot, trying to justify the same exact situation. It's not the comparable to use. Use the comparable that is realistic and sell the dream if the numbers make sense.
Yeah, definitely. And hey, if you guys are getting lots and land leads, don't throw those away. Like, please don't. I mean, call me or Kevin. Like, this is like we had the one land live. We had Brent Moreno come on. He said how to buy land. Land is scarce, right? There's not enough land out there right now. We have a huge affordable housing issue, right? One thing I'm doing right now is I'm researching container homes and how you can take container homes, drop them on lots and land in the States and create affordable housing, right? And I've talked to a lot of people who are doing the same thing. So if you're getting good land leads, right, there are people out there looking for land right now, looking for lots for teardowns because they're not making any more of that,
We got Daryl asking, do you do the same formula at 70% for land or retail?
I get this question a lot, and I'm gonna be completely honest. I don't use the 70% formula ever. I just don't. I feel like the formula does work if you have a cookie cutter wholesale deal, but the majority of our deals that we're dealing with aren't cookie cutter wholesale deals, so that number doesn't even come into my into my kind of calculations.
Yeah, it's more doing your research and seeing what people are buying and reverse engineering from there. I think that's the most accurate. Running your comps, exactly what we're talking about today, and being able to determine what people are buying for, what people are selling for, and using that formula better.
Yeah. I know 70% rule came out really big, when wholesaling started being pushed, and it does work, but this market is so crazy right now, moving up that you might be cutting yourself short, but also if you're just going off that formula, you're going to throw away a lot of leads that are actually good deals.
Yeah. We got Saucy conceded. How far do you typically go back in date before you completely move out of the development for comps?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the development for one, right? Again, there are some developments which have no comps because nobody's selling a house. Like the people love where they live at, they're not selling, right? So if that's the development, I might go back a year or two, right? But normally, I don't go back past a year. That's just me. Normally, I don't go back past a year.
Agreed. Our next question. I'm currently cold calling and doing bandit signs. My signs are doing pretty good. I want to get into texting. What's a good text service to use? And how many texts should I send out to get 2 deals per month?
That's a great question. Hey, I want to make sure you guys still know about our free virtual investing club course we got out, because we go over all stuff texting. With texting, I mean, I'm going to be biased and say what I use, which I use batch leads for my program, and it works great. There are other platforms that probably work just as well, but for me personally, I use batch. I use batch because it's easy. Everything's all on one platform, from my pulling my list, skipping my list, texting my list, they even have a dollar in their list, right? So that's what we use. If you want to use batch, we got a link that you guys can get to get a little discount. We'll give you that. It's in our Facebook group. But as far as how many to text, so I have guys who text for me. They're actually like ex-football players who I coach. They're like, you have a goal that they're supposed to text out 500 texts per day. That's their goal. And that's what we do in our company. So I have 3 people right now. They're hitting out 500 per day. And that's the kind of barometer that we have for us.
You can get the course, guys. You can go to the website, shutupandinvest.com, and there's a button there that'll lead you to the page, or you can go directly to the page, which is shutupandinvest.club. If you guys are watching on YouTube, it's the banner right there on the bottom. Shutupandinvest.club has all the resources and has the trainings of how we do the text. In fact, in that training course, you'll see us having a live conversation with somebody via text that's responding to the text messages we're sending out.
Yeah, definitely.
We got another question. If you see there are no properties selling in the area, even if you go back 1 or 2 years, would you still continue with the deal or back out?
Let me see that. If you see there are no properties selling. So there's two things. You either have no comps because the area is that good, or the area is that bad, right? Like those are the only reasons why you have no comps, right? So if it's a questionable area and there's no comps in 2 years, I mean, that means no one's buying there, so you might not want to buy there, right? If it's different where you say, hey, I know this is a decent area, right? I know where this is at. There's nothing sold, and you get a deal there, that's probably a hot deal. That's probably a really, really hot deal. If you know that yourself, this is a good area, but there's no comps, it probably means because very rarely does a house come up, So I would definitely continue with that deal. So, those are usually the only 2 reasons why you see no comps. Or if there's no comps, it's because you have a 1-bedroom and the rest of the neighborhood is a 4-bedroom, then still go with it. But it's but you're gonna have to really adjust your numbers based off that sheet we showed you earlier.
What on a seller financing deal, Jay? On a seller financing deal, you got it locked down. You know how much your cash flow is going to be based off of what market rents are going to be in that area. So how are you determining your price points once you got a seller finance deal locked up?
Got it. So 2 things, right? Remember, there's different scenarios with seller financing deals, okay? Is this a deal that I'm getting and I'm selling to an investor, or is it a deal I'm getting like a homeowner might buy it? More of an end buyer. You're saying an investor, Kevin?
Let's start off with investor and then let's move on to home buyer.
If I'm selling to an investor, my rule is I want to make sure that everybody in this game can win, right? So I got to price it. Remember, with seller finance, it's not so much the purchase price, it's the monthly payment, right? We're selling these deals off the monthly payment, right? So I have to price it to where my monthly payment that I'm charging my investor still gives some room to cash flow, right? So me and Kevin have gone over this multiple times, right? Usually we're saying, hey, we want to have $250 to $300 a month cash flow there. That makes sense if I'm going to buy a deal as an investor, okay? So if the market rents $1,000, my end buyer investor, his all-in price, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance should be no more than $750 that he's paying me per month, because in that way that gives him a cushion where he can make, after he has his own expenses, right? He can make a little bit of cash flow per month.
And then if we're going typical primary residence home buyer, is that what you were referring to on the home buyer?
Yeah, because
primary?
sometimes there are Yeah, sometimes there are some home buyers who are going to buy these homes primary. If you do that, make sure you follow all the rules. We always say that. But if you do, we're trying to just be underneath the rent, right? So if the rent's $1,000, if they can get into this house for $950 a month, they're going to be happy, right? Because they're not paying $1,000 above the rent, right? And so when I say $950, remember, a lot of people are charged. They're calculating P&I, principal and interest, and that going to get the taxes and insurance. That homeowner has to pay taxes and insurance, right? So make sure that PITI, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, is around $950, and they'll be happy getting into that property.
We got another question. Melvin's asking, what do you do when a 6-bedroom, 3-bathroom comps for 135,000 with older sales, but the seller shows you a 3-2 that's modern built that just sold for 450,000, both row homes?
6-bed, 3-bath comes for 135. 3-2, that's a modern build, so 450.
I go back to okay, he clarifies it, on the same exact street.
Okay.
We go back to the cheat sheet says within 5 years of construction, right? So if this was built again back in 1960 and he's showing you a house that was built in 2005, you start there.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you see that, then you're going to know, okay, this is newer construction. The prices are definitely worth more. That's where we're going to start at. Yes.
Then you say, okay, if I want this house as a 6-bedroom, 3-bathroom to look just like the 450,000, what do we got to do? Let's break down the actual cost. And when you actually come to find out that the only way to make it look like that is a complete tear down. So right off the jump, you got to factor in the cost of a tear down, then build it all back up per price per square foot. You start to show them that we're comparing apples and oranges here. So if it's on the same street, this is like, I'm curious to know what market it is in, because this happens in California all the time, where you have a 6-bedroom, 3-bathroom that is completely old and has been there forever. It looks nothing like 2 houses down that is like this modern, beautiful build out, because people buy tear downs there all the time, and it's about the views off the sides of the mountains, and depending on which neighborhood you're in, you see that a lot in California. That's typical.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference where the house is at. Definitely.
Do you charge a down payment or a security deposit for your homes that you do owner financing with?
Of course, a down payment. It's not a security deposit. Remember, when you're doing owner financing, you're not a landlord. They're not a tenant. They're at the actual homeowner. So you charge a down payment. That down payment is income. So if I sell a house for $100,000 with $10,000 down, that $10,000 is income that goes right to us. It doesn't go into a escrow account that's held there until it's done. That is our income. So yes, of course, you charge a down payment on every owner finance home. Just if Kevin would do a conventional mortgage for a homeowner, he's not going to say, hey, here's your house for 100%, and you put nothing in it, right? So you want to get something in our pocket so they have some kind of skin in the game.
Yeah, Eddie was saying that those price differences happens in Atlanta as well. Yeah, knowing your market, and of course, a seller who's got the older house is always going to want to justify why they get a more of a price point and compare it to the more expensive houses, even if it's not really comparable. And there you could just basically say, would you buy my car that's a 1960 car for the $40,000 that you bought a car that was built 5 years ago? Like, are we going to compare the Escalade to the old school truck that you have parked in the back of the Chevy? And are you going to pay the same price point? The answer is going to be no. Houses are no different.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, Eddie had a good question earlier on too. I think it was up a little bit, but he was asking if you can get higher rent in one area, why would you rent in a lower area? I think that was the question that he asked. So
If you can get higher rents in a different market, why would you invest in the smaller market?
I mean, end of the day, it's about what's the rate of return, right? So let's say I can get $2,500 a month in California for a 1-bedroom, but I'm paying $850 for that house, or I can get $1,000 a month in somewhere in Michigan. I'm paying $50,000 for the house, right? So we look more at the rental return than we look at the actual rental rate, because it can be the same income level of person, right? As far as the line of poverty or wherever it's at, and they could be paying double the rent, but living at a less comfortable conditions because of where they live at.
Yeah, definitely. You want to look at your cash on cash return on investment. How much is it costing you and how much are you getting back?
Definitely.
Julio's asking, is that down payment going towards the purchase price or is it just for the option to purchase?
An option is when you do a lease option. So there's two different things. A seller financing, if I'm going to sell Kevin a house and seller financing, there's no option to purchase. We're going to structure at the beginning where he becomes a homeowner at close, right? So if the price is $100,000, he gives me $10,000. The note that I have with him is for $90,000 at whatever interest rate over a certain amount of time. So no, that goes off the price.
Julio's also asking, if we don't use the 70% rule, what exactly do you do to deduct for your costs? So if you do it where you're running your comps and you're determining what people are paying for the properties, like if you run comps and you see this property was sold twice in the last 18 months, the buyer originally, who ended up doing the flip, bought it at 135,000 and then turned around and sold it for 260 within 18 months. You kind of know, without having to do any 70% rule or without deducting anything, that you can contact that same buyer and say, hey, I got another one around that 135, 140 range. Would you like to buy it again? And you need to get that under contract with your seller for under that price range. So if you can get it at 120, 125 and turn around and wholesale it for 140, you're making 15 grand there. You're making anywhere between 20. And that's how you kind of determine what people are actually paying for the properties in that area. And you don't have to do any of the 70% rule or deduct. If you are going to start deducting cost, and I like doing about 8% off the price. So now instead of working off 100% of the price, I'm working off 92% of the price. That's closing costs, commissions, and everything when I buy and when I sell, right? So if the property ARV after repair value is 100,000, right off the jump, I'm starting at 92,000 because all that extra 8,000 is the closing cost every time we're buying and then turning around and selling. If you are your own realtor or if you sell it by owner and you end up not having to pay that much in commissions, great. That's just more money in your pocket. But if you're doing your numbers to see if a deal works right off the jump, I look at it from a 92% perspective because I associate 8% in the buying and selling fees. Then from the 92%, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, all right, well, if I got to rehab this place, how much is it going to cost me? And then I'm basically deducting from experience. And if you don't know that number, call a general contractor and say, listen, a 1,500 square foot house, if we had to redo the whole thing based off the pictures, or if we just had to paint and put new bathrooms and floor and change the roof, you basically give them what the situation is and just ask them roughly what is it in the range of. And I don't want to spin your wheels, make you do an estimate until I actually get it under contract, but give me a ballpark to see if this is even worth continuing to negotiate. And they can kind of give you a rough estimate based off their experience if they really know what they're doing.
Yeah, you start to realize, you go to a house that's 1,000 square feet, and you can kind of figure out in your head, okay, depending on how it looks like, this is a rental rehab. Because there's two different types of rehabs. There's a rental rehab, so I'm going to turn it for a rental, and then there's like a fix and flip rehab, right? So if you don't have experience with those numbers, I would suggest you talk to a few contractors, right, and just go look at their jobs, right? Just say, hey, show me some of the jobs you did. How much did it cost for this? How much did it cost for that? Kind of a more higher rehab, a less intrusive rehab, and get a good idea of those numbers, because I can walk into a 1,500 square foot house right now, see the condition, know kind of what's going on, and have a good ballpark figure of what that number is going to be. And I'd rather do my numbers off of that. And like Kevin said, take the 8% off. That's so key. People always forget that. Like sellers forget that. Wholesalers forget that. Like they always send me a deal and say, and I'm like, hey, what about my closing costs and my commissions? Like, I can count. Sellers always forget that. If you want to get a seller down in price, mention that 8% to the seller right away, and they'll say, oh yeah, that is right. Because they'll give you the number that the realtor told them. And I say, but you're not paying commissions and closing costs, so I got to account for that.
If your VAs are texting 500 texts per day, is that an 8-hour shift? And how often do you text the same exact list? When I cold call, if I get a lot of no answers, how often do you retext your no answers?
Got it. So again, I wouldn't call them VA. I mean, they are VAs, but they're local in the States, and they don't actually have a shift, right? So some are in college, right? They text throughout the day when they're not going to class, right? Some of them wake up and they start texting at 9. They might text to 5. Some might text at 9 to 1, go do some stuff and back and text, right? I don't have any time shifts on them. They just know, hey, I need my 500 texts per day, and they get paid off of that. So if they don't get them, they know they get paid less. As far as texting the same list, man, I text the same list all the time, right? And that's saying the same, like we upload a list. Maybe it's, this county's vacants, right? We'll text that vacant list once a month, every month, right? Maybe we have our tire landlord list, right? We'll text that list once a month, every month, right? Now, I'll pull it again in a few months and add some stuff to it, but we're texting it all the time. We literally are texting it once a month for probably that whole year, Like some of those people are going to get texted probably 3 or 4 times a month, all the time, because they might be on 3 or 4 lists, So again, with texting is a lot less expensive. So I'm a lot less, worried about, hey, is this person getting text a lot? When I do direct mail costs more money, so we kind of filter that list a little bit more. But with texting, we're just blasting that text out, and trying to hit up, find who we can find. You'll be surprised too. Some people say, hey, I text that list for over a year. I still get leads from the same list I've been texting since the beginning of last year. I'll still get a lead now from it because their minds change. They finally get the text. They finally respond to the text. Remember, when you're texting too, some texts get blocked, some don't, right? So what Batch does is you have 10 texts, like initial texts that you send out, and they recycle those initial 10. Some of those, 6 of those 10 might never make it to Kevin's phone because his carrier just blocks it, That last one might get to him. So we're always texting them over and over and over again. And they can opt out. If they opt out, they say stop, and they don't get texted again, and they won't get texted. But until they tell us that, they're going to get texted.
You say a good round system is every 4 to 6 weeks, hit the list again?
Yeah, I probably would say that, yeah. So if I'm texting, Miami-Dade County tire landlords, right, and it's about 2,000 names, I'll go through other lists before I go back to that one. So probably about 4 to 6 weeks, definitely.
What's the best way to dispo land? So we had a show on that where we got into it. We're actually going to do a training within the Facebook group. I got a schedule with him. We've been talking back and forth of the right time to actually do a case study on a deal and discuss more in depth, because that was a popular show. But again, do your research on your comps. Who are the buyers for those? And then talk to them. They're probably interested in buying more land if they made a good decision on the one that they bought that you ran your comparables on. Skip trace the company, find out who the officers are, Google the company, skip trace it, get in touch with them. If they don't want to buy, sometimes they know somebody else that might be interested in buying there. Every realtor in your area, obviously, especially ones that have sold land in that area, you want to contact them as well. And every developer, all your local developers, you want to contact them and let them know as well you got a piece of land. Yeah,
another thing too is one that the neighbor, always check the neighbors, right? the neighbors are, if a piece of land comes up next to me, right, and I own the house next door, I'm probably gonna be interested in buying that land if I can. So I always check with the neighbors too.
That's a good one. We got a cash buy. I have a cash buyer that has bought 3 deals from me in the last 2 months, but he likes to put the earnest money deposit at his title company and in the title company name. Is that common?
First of all, congrats on those 3 deals. But yeah, that's definitely common, right? That's common.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, listen, at the end of the day, if you create scarcity in your relationship and in your marketing, and they know, like, it's about the relationship, right? If they feel like they're your go-to and they're doing you a favor buying you the properties, they're calling all the shots, right? They're saying, hey, I'm holding money in my title company's name. I'm doing it this way. I'm doing it that way. But if the relationship and the marketing and the negotiation is positioned like, hey, I'll hook you up, but I got other people that want this deal too. If I really want this deal, and the only way of getting this deal is using your escrow account with your title company, how bad do I want the deal? I'm not going to lose a deal because I'm scared to put an escrow deposit in your title company's name. But if I say, hey, listen, no problem, but I'm using my title company, they hook me up, they already have the escrow, I'll get you the escrow letter. The perfect objection rule is, hey, listen, I understand, but we actually just got burned on a couple deals where a couple of investors gave us fake escrow letters and the money wasn't there, and it turned out to be a nightmare. So now company policy is across the board, escrow has to be held at such and such title company. I'll give you their name and number. Feel free to call them so you can feel comfortable. But from this point forward, we're getting a couple offers for this deal. I really want to consider yours, but it's got to be held at such and such title company. Now you're not the bad guy. You told them a story as to why you guys are making the policy to control the situation. It happens all the time. There are plenty of fake escrow letters going around, or they make one deposit and they're making 7 offers with that same escrow and getting 3 or 4 of them accepted with the same $1,000 escrow. There's a lot of that going around when they use their own title company. So just I like to do the nightmare objection. Hey, listen, we've recently had a nightmare over that particular situation. So now the company policy, my partner, blah, blah, blah. I'm blaming Jory all the time on deals.
I was going to say too, though, it's common for them to ask that, right? But I will say this. I just had a nightmare deal, and I never let anyone use their own title company. So I will tell you this, for me on my side, you have to always go through my title company, right? And you either send an earnest deposit to me, to our company, or to the title company. So it's not uncommon for someone to ask that. Now, if you have a good relationship with the buyer, the buyer's solid, I wouldn't care, right? If you know that buyer's solid, he's going to close, I wouldn't care. But you do have to make sure that if you're using someone else's title company, vet that title company, right? And what Kevin said is true. At the end of the day, you're the seller. As long as you're not desperate to sell that house right away, you control where it goes. I know in my company, you're using my title company because my title company gets things done. And I had a nightmare situation just last month where we're wholesaling the deal. We actually didn't even wholesale this deal. We closed on the deal and we're selling the deal for cash. And the title company, the buyer, which for some reason we let him use the title company, they would not insure the title on the deal because we sold it for 2.5 times more than what the SCV was, the assessed value, right? You hear that on like a finance deal, right? With an appraisal, there are rules where you can't flip a deal for a certain amount of the price. But in the cash deal, that does not happen, So that kind of was a deal that kind of, blew up for me ever allowing that buyer to even buy a house from us again because of the way that it turned out. So you will hear people ask that, but you still have the power. You have the gold, you have the carry, you have the deal, right? So if you're comfortable with it, do it. If not, make them use your title company.
100%. All right, we're hitting the 60-minute mark. As always, another great show. This is a hot topic. We will get deeper into doing some case studies within the Facebook group of how to comp properties. Keep submitting your joint venture deals, and we can start doing live breakdowns of those joint venture deals in the Facebook group. That way you guys can see what we're looking at. Does it work? Does it not work? And why? So we can maybe do that once a week. What do you think, Jay? I like that idea.
Yeah, I like that. Let's line it up. That sounds good.
Let me see here. We got one last comment and we're done for the day. Great. Thanks for all the awesome info. I want to start texting next week. I have prop stream. I have about 3 to 4 hours a day to text. How big of a list should I pull to get at least 1 or 2 deals per month?
I mean, that's always subjective to what your budget is, right? I can't tell you. I don't know what your budget is. What kind of list you're pulling. Me personally, I like to have 2,500 names minimum, right? That we're going to text. So that's.
Yeah, Jay got cut off there with the internet. So if you didn't hear that last part, he said 2,500 names minimum on a list to send out. Jay, you back?
Can you hear me?
Now I can. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. I can still hear you. I don't know what happened, but yeah, I like to be 2,500 minimum. If you're gonna keep hitting that list over and over and over again, of course you want a bigger list. But starting off, you want to have at least 2,500 leads.
Yeah, I think a good 90-day mark. If you're cold calling and you really want to be rocking and rolling, if you have the budget and can essentially target a good 10,000 per month, so essentially 30,000. If you can have a list of 30,000 and really for 90 days go hard on that 30,000, you're going to be doing deals off of that. And you keep rotating that list. You don't get it like Jay said earlier. But I mean, if you're going large and you want to do multiple deals, that's like a benchmark. Now, obviously, it's expensive. Not everybody can afford to target 30,000 people, skip trace them, and all that. But that's a nice number if you can get to that amount, because you're going to have a lot of rotation to be able to go back to and call. And then your next quarter, if you can afford doing it again because you're closing deals, imagine if you do that for 4 quarters, you're hitting a nice amount of people at that point.
Yeah, he said he has about 2K a month, so you can definitely get, but 2K a month. The main thing is skipping your list, right? So I always tell people when you first start off getting a list, the cost to skip traces was cost the most, right? After you skip it, you're good. So I mean, I would definitely like at least 1,000 leads.
Jay, your internet's going out big time on there. So a lot of you guys are asking for our text and our dialer. So what we'll do is we'll post the links in the Facebook group. Jay, if you want, put the skip trace and the dialer links in the Facebook group. You guys will also find it in the virtual training course where we actually do live texting video in there, and you guys can see what we say, how we do it, and actually have a live conversation with a lead. And there's more resources there that you guys can find within the training. We appreciate you guys. We love the questions. That's the best part of the show, to be honest with you. It re-energizes us. We like the fact that you guys are out there, engage with our content. Keep sending the deals. Keep sending the questions. Do us a huge favor. Put comments on our Facebook. Hit the like button. That keeps the algorithm going for YouTube. Hit the YouTube. Subscribe to us. Share this with people that you know that are in the real estate game. That is how you can pay us in digital currency.
Or Bitcoin. You take Bitcoin.
All right, guys. As always, shut up and invest.